When Gods Blink by Charmingly Shallow. On March 25th at 14:57 GMT, the world stopped for 27 minutes and 54 seconds. No one noticed at first. Those that eventually did were ordered to keep quiet. There was no sudden jolt, no collapsing into unconsciousness, no transition into utter darkness and back again. Just nothing. For everyone, time appeared to pass as normal, 1 second moving uneventfully to the next. Birds flew, people talked, the wind and the rain blew respectively. Nothing had occurred to indicate anything untoward or unexpected had happened to the inhabitants of the Earth. Only the ones who looked beyond our planet and its ring of constantly chattering satellites now found that the rest of the universe told a different story. NASA and related space agencies noticed first. Signals to ongoing missions beyond those in orbit around Earth were all off by almost 30 minutes. Frantic investigation revealed that the same time discrepancy was occurring for all incoming messages. Naturally, they came to the conclusion that the problem must therefore lie not with these external elements, but with the computers on Earth. But this led to a bigger question. One computer glitch was possible, but all of the various space agencies across the globe showing the exact same failure at the exact same time? Naturally, a virus or sophisticated global hacking attack was the next obvious answer. An international team to investigate such a large, well-coordinated cyber attack was being discussed when the first calls of alarm came in, from confused and concerned astronomers. And the true significance of what actually had happened became known. Using data retrieved from telescopic arrays at Jodrell Bank, Palo Alto, Mount Pleasant, and others across the world, confirmed against existing stellar records and computational models of the local galaxy and beyond, it became apparent that, for 27 minutes and 54 seconds, the Earth had somehow been out of sync with the rest of the known existence. In essence, the world as we knew it blinked out of existence during this period, then returned as if nothing happened. For all intents and purposes, during that short window of time, we ceased to be. The International Investigation Team was repurposed, a blank check written, given its pick of resources of the best minds in their field, all to investigate this one event, and all swore to the utmost secrecy. None of them needed to be told the panic that would ensue if this information became public before a suitable, hopefully reassuring reason for the event could be given. Those that couldn't keep silent were quickly and quietly silenced themselves. Despite the various project names assigned to the subteams, those involved began referring to the event in a half-joking manner as the day God blinked. In casual conversation between project members, this was eventually shortened even further to just the blink. After 6 rings, Ben finally answered the door. "Mark, what are you doing here?" "You invited me, remember?" "Did I? How odd. Well, I probably had a reason at the time. It's still good to see you anyway, come on in." I had known Ben since childhood. We attended the same schools for a while, before his crazily high IQ led him to the fast track to higher education and beyond. We kept in touch though. His parents were sensible enough to realize he needed some grounding in the real world, and encouraged our friendship with the usual sleepovers and camping trips. Their smarts lay in forcing Ben not to let his social skills atrophy completely like a lot of very intelligent kids were wont to do. As a result, whilst he frequently sidetracked and became forgetful, he was still a functioning, normal member of society with a degree of success. After our respective schooling had finished, we both moved to the IT industry, though at vastly different levels. For myself, I now worked in tech support, mostly maintaining an insurance system for a range of small independent companies. Boring, yes, but it paid well and allowed me to travel. He, on the other hand, was self-employed and preferred working from his apartment of solitude, as he called it, often referring to himself as a consulting technician. He'd gotten the idea from watching reruns of Sherlock. His work was a lot more varied and advanced, and whilst he never openly admitted to hacking, he certainly had enough technical knowledge to have been employed by such names as Google, Microsoft, and IBM, when they needed someone to test their all-new unshakable security system they had just put in place, or to track down those who had been able to breach their all-new unshakable security system they just put in place. He preferred the latter work, he told me. It added the thrill of the chase, plus it usually paid better. What was less well known was the work he occasionally did off the books, for such groups as the Department of Defense and the NSA. He admitted his working for them was twofold. One, they wanted his expertise and brilliance. And two, it allowed them to keep tabs on his expertise and brilliance. He didn't mind this, as he explained once. Well, it keeps them happy knowing where I am and what I'm doing. Or at least they think what I'm doing. And then he'd just grin and pass me the latest decoded email he'd encrypted. He didn't do anything with the stuff he found, he just enjoyed the challenge. To be completely honest, sometimes it was hard to pin down just who Ben was and what his motivations were from one moment to the next. I'd just grown up accepting him and his eccentricities, quickly coming to the conclusion his life was a complex pattern of impulse and ideas, woven together from threads that were just as much madness as genius. There was his common belief that every time someone said abracadabra, an angel lost its wings, or that the common cold existed as a vast hive mentality that avoided detection by its elements constantly hopping from body to body. Yeah, mad crazy shit like that. Half the time, I thought he was joking, and for the rest, I hope he had enough common sense to rein it in public. Then there were times where he did and said things that ended up on the opposite end of that, when what he said made absolute unnerving sense. On those occasions, he spoke with such a lucidity that seemed to cut through all the crap mankind had built around all its centralities and beliefs, as if he touched on some universal truth we should all by rights know. All I could do at those times were marvel at how someone with such a kaleidoscope for a brain, entertaining such a maelstrom of contradictory thoughts constantly, could bring all those elements together to produce such a single blindingly white light of truth. Then he'd suddenly go off on a tangent, accusing his neighbors of being CIA agents trailing neurotoxin on the local cats, and we'd be back to normal. Still, all the same, I came at his summons. Despite the crazed theories and odd habits, it was definitely the most entertaining conversation around. Plus, his library of illegally downloaded films was truly a wonder to behold. That, and he was my friend. It was during a piece of work for NASA, idling through their security systems, looking for proof of Area 51, during his off time, that led him to first discover the piece that put all together the facts concerning March 25th and the blink found by the international team so far. Being his only close friend, he decided to fill me in on the ongoing conspiracy, mainly so he could show off his talents once more, hence the invitation. As he spoke, he appeared completely oblivious to how my face was gradually growing and growing more incredulous. He described what the world space agencies and astronomers had discovered, and how the secret scientific think tank was now investigating what happened. Physicists, quantum theorists, mathematicians, the whole spectrum of scientists, all focused on this one problem and the questions that were associated with it. What had happened? Why had it happened? And most importantly, was it likely to happen again? And if so, what was the risk of it being permanent? He told me the news of the total blackout and how any amateur astronomer or similar who came to the same conclusions were being brought on board, treated as cranks, or disappeared with extreme prejudice. Their biggest fear was mass panic, he said, or the world's religions taking credit on behalf of their respective gods and several genocidal wars kicking off as a result. As he said, "There's nothing more disconcerting, I guess, than not being able to trust your own reality. We've been raised in a world where it's fine to distrust your government, your employers, even your family. But your own existence? Definitely a recipe for chaos. Places like CERN have been placed on almost permanent hiatus. The governments of the world have no proof experiments like these ones that they were doing are the cause. But I suppose they had to point the finger somewhere until more evidence showed up. There's a lot of theoretical work being done now, but pretty much zero practical. I guess it's only a matter of time before they get scriptwriters in from Doctor Who to brainstorm a possible cause. He sighed at this, sat back in his swivel chair and spun around, gazing at the ceiling, seemingly lost in thought. Then he slowly came to a stop and returned his gaze to me, a mischievous twinkle in his eye. Then, on the other side, you have the religions. At this, he paused again, looking around his cluttered desk, then started building what looked like a tower out of various bits and pieces. As it slowly grew in height, he continued speaking. Remember our Bible classes? I like those stories. If not the morality, I especially liked the story of Babel. The rising structure of books, hard drives, chocolate bars, magazines, and any other random item his hands could find and reach had risen to just below the height of his chin. He added a few more items, adding to the precarious sway it already had. Pushing again, his hands not touching it, but spread wide on either side ready to stop the imminent collapse. He attempted the voice of an old English vicar delivering a sermon. Man in his hubris decided to build a tower to God, so he may converse with his creator. God, though, in his glorious wisdom decided man should not be allowed to do this and took steps to rectify the situation. So he cursed mankind with a gift of many tongues. He smirked at this, his eyes never leaving the tower, and returned to his normal voice. Well, many a project, plan, or place has been ruined by the inability of people to understand each other. It might be that humanity is overreaching itself again. With the final proof of existence of the Higgs boson, maybe God's decided we're getting too close again, and he's selfish about his tricks. Time for another lesson, perhaps. At this, he slowly closed his hands into fists on either side of the precarious edifice he had created. Then, with a single finger, gingerly pushed near the top. With a crash, his metaphorical tower scattered all across the table and the floor. He waited until the sound of books and rubbish falling had died away before speaking again. This time, in a thoughtful voice. Maybe the blink, as they call it, was God giving us a heads up, a warning to stop encroaching on his intellectual property, else risk the consequences. Then he grinned, his tried and true atheism once more reasserting itself. Personally, looking at all the facts so far accumulated, I believe the answer lies further afield, he said, a knowing smile on his face. I took comfort breaking at this point, shaking my head at this new conspiracy theory. When I got back, he'd moved on already. His head was now buried in the side of a PC tower case, now perched on a different desk he had reserved for mechanical endeavors. It was quiet for a while, only broken by his humming as he fiddled inside the case whilst I looked around for somewhere reasonably clean to sit. Then, abruptly, he spoke again, his voice oddly masked by the case. As I was saying, I believe the answers they seek lie further afield. I have statistics, proof, in fact. You have statistics. You. He'd often laughed statistics off in the past, and blamed them for 63.75% of the world's ills. In his mad pedantry, he had indeed worked out a formula that he said proved this figure. That being said, he told me he could destroy the entire world with a single spreadsheet. In my more fatalistic moments, I honestly believed him. I accept statistics, and all of their perceived infallibility, are the most fallible thing in the world. He mumbled from inside the case, reaching aimlessly for a screwdriver on the desk next to him, his hand colored in orange and black from a mix of grease and Cheetos. Take a work of fiction, add numbers to it, and suddenly it becomes non-fiction. Add a pie chart and a graph and it becomes the invalid truth. Bollocks, I said, only half listening as I lounged on a large dirty beanbag littered with wrappers and old wire. Then he retracted his head from the case and looked me in the eyes with a devilish glint in his own. Pass it on to the right people in the right places at the right time, and it becomes law. I replied, deciding not to entertain his paranoid fantasies further, in favor of a magazine I had just found on the floor amongst all the other junky, haphazardly discarded parts of his less-than-ordered, less-than-sanitary lifestyle. He grunted at my lack of enthusiasm, continuing one of his favorite topics. He buried his head in the tower case once more and continued anyway. However, in those cases, I'm referring to your basic, biased statistics. Marketing, pressure groups, political, that kind of unbelievable crap. Now, pattern recognition. That element within the otherwise exploitable statistics. That I do have time for. Extracting his head again, he looked around the desk the case was on, shifting papers this way and that, as he continued, partially lost in thought. You've heard of SETI, of course. Hold on. If you're heading into alien territory, you can kiss my ass right here and now. He fixed me with a glare and I threw my hands up in the air in resignation, muttering, I'm sorry, please continue, oh knowledgeable one. Thank you. SETI is a search for extraterrestrial life, one of their jobs being the analysis of signals bouncing in and around our local galaxy, of which you've never found any conclusive proof of intelligent life. I reminded him poignantly. He ignored it. What if the patterns they've been looking for are wrong? What if you could analyze these seemingly random signals another way? What if there is a pattern, but it's spread over a longer period so you don't see it as a pattern? Aha! Triumphantly, his hand came out of a pile of books, clutching a pad of post-it notes, scattering the books across his desk in doing so. Fishing a pen out of his trouser pockets, I saw him scribble "to do" on the top of the note and slap it on the side of the tower, before turning to me with an excited grin on his face. Have you been watching the Discovery Channel again? Is there a UFO special running this week? I asked. He looked at me indignantly, though I noticed he quickly closed the TV guide he had open on his desk amongst the mess. What if I told you I had written down my own pattern recognition algorithm? What if I told you I had found a message in those signals? Bullshit, I said quietly, suddenly less sure of myself, now more than a little shaken by what it meant if he had indeed succeeded in discovering a message from an alien race. Well, it wasn't easy, he continued, feigning an air of false modesty, and I do have NASA to thank. Although, if they discovered I've been running this algorithm in the background on their decryption computer, then I may have to leave abruptly, or apologize. No one can ever tell what mood they'll be in one day to the next. Ben, what about the message? I said, firmly cutting him short, standing to face him. Oh, that. He went quiet, looked around evasively. My doubts quickly returned. What was the message, Ben? Well, it was short. It's rather impressive decoding anything like that, obviously. Ben! He paused, then said abjectly, Hello, are you content? There were a few seconds of silence before I started laughing uncontrollably, mostly out of relief. Ben looked indignant. Well, I think it's a very poignant message. Better than prepare to be annihilated. Oh God, hold on a sec, I can't breathe. You had me shitting myself for a moment there. I take it then you believe what I found is a message from an alien race? Would you please stop laughing? I'm sorry. Ben, you gotta admit, if you were to imagine contact from another species, I think it'd be something a little more, I don't know, profound? I mean, we've sent out a golden disc giving a snapshot of the human race and our knowledge. Music, mathematics, you name it. And what do the hyper-intelligent alien species send back? The equivalent of, have a nice day? You don't think it's from outer space then? He reiterated. I looked at his pained expression and answered in a more reasonable voice. Look, Ben, I'm sorry. I think your algorithm found a pattern that wasn't there, and expropriated meaning from it. Turning, I returned to the beanbag in my perusal of the magazine. He stood there a few moments, then he turned and flopped down in a big, comfortable swivel chair behind another desk. This one littered with laptops in various states of deconstruction and construction, connected by an array of cables that appeared to be haphazardly put together. Pressing the on switch of all three of them, his face was illuminated by the telltale glow of the screens, his focus flitting between screens and his fingers dancing on the keyboards in front of him. He had nevertheless decided to continue, and began outlining his newest theory. I'll disagree. I'll go even further and state that it is an alien species, with an interest in the human race, a species directly involved with the evolution of mankind. Here we go. Are we really back on the engineers theory once more? Has Ridley Scott been sending you secret images in his films again? I muttered, not looking up from the page I was now reading. He ignored and then continued. Think about it. The human body is an amazing machine. It regulates itself. It heals itself. It has the ability to create more of itself through reproduction. I thought you only believed in things that you have experienced yourself, I asked, peering over the top of the magazine at him, my voice openly amused. I saw him scowl before he continued with his monologue. As I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted, the human body is an amazing machine. That's exactly what it is. A piece of technology, built using biological parts rather than mechanical ones. It is not, however, a perfect machine. What do you mean? I asked despite myself. Well, think about it. It has its own defense capabilities, in the form of white blood cells to ward off illness, the ability to heal wounds, etc., etc. Occasionally, though, a piece of machinery goes wrong. It functions incorrectly and overreacts to certain stimuli. It's a faulty piece of code, if you will. And what's that? Why, cancer, of course. What? I asked, shocked. It was another crazy conversation with Ben, but the word cancer always sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. I had seen its effects enough on friends and family to be adverse to it even being mentioned. Ben, though, oblivious to my discomfort, continued. Cancer is a part of the body performing incorrect actions, creating cells where it doesn't need to. It's not an attack on an external source causing this, but rather an internal failure of the biological system. A mistake, nothing more. We have, in essence, a design flaw, and if our God, or gods, are supposedly infallible, then logic dictates we are not built by a benign, omnipotent being, but rather we're constructs of fallible ones. Actions that should have been taken to rectify these errors, to complain, if you will. Despite myself, I took another look over the magazine at him. Nervous now for some reason I couldn't quite put my finger on. What did you do? Well, I sent a message back telling them this, of course. I hadn't seen Ben in 6 months. Work had kept me busy in London, and he wasn't one for texting or casual telephone conversations to catch up. But one day, he called me up suddenly to come visit. By this time, snippets of information about the Blink had leaked out onto the internet, on even some of the more respected sites and journalists. Most people saw it as just another mad conspiracy theory. Having spoken to Ben, though, when he'd outlined all the data, the fact that other sources were now relaying the same information that sent chills through me, it was one thing for it being just another one of his crazy theories, but quite another to see growing numbers of external bodies were now seeming to confirm the event's existence. This time when I rang his doorbell, he answered on the first ring, but I wasn't ready for the sight when he opened the door. He was haggard and tired like he hadn't slept in days. His clothes were rumpled and dirty, even more so than normal. As I stood there, I caught the look in his eyes. They were bloodshot and large, dark circles under them. But there was a calm I hadn't seen in him before, which was echoed by his voice when he welcomed me in. I couldn't quite put my finger on it at first, but then it dawned on me. I had seen and heard this kind of response before, in those who were in the final stages of a terminal illness. Acceptance. I felt my body prickle with unease. That chill that ripples across your skin when you can't stop thinking about the past or the future. All of your attention is suddenly refocused on the now, because you know the world you're used to is about to change in some fundamental way. I paused in his doorway and locked eyes with him. Without thinking, I drew him into a massive bear hug. Ben had never been one for physical contact in all of the time I had known him, but he accepted the hug without question, and I felt some tension release from him. After we parted, I asked him sincerely, "Are you okay? Nothing wrong with you?" No, nothing physically at least." "Good, because you look like shit." He laughed weakly at that, then quieted. We stood there silently for a few moments, before the thought that had been nagging me since I'd been invited forced itself out. "I've noticed on the web there's a lot of noise about this blink thing that you mentioned last time I was here. And I'm wondering, did you get an answer?" He smiled weakly, ignoring my questions, inviting me in and simply pointing me to the large beanbag for me to sit in, as I had sat in so many times before. If anything, his apartment was even messier than the last time I was here, but somehow the impression of organized chaos was gone. This was just mess that had been left to accumulate, like the owner no longer cared. As I sat down, he went over to the desk and fiddled with the laptop, moved some random items on his desk, almost like he was stalling. Then, turning to face me, resting himself against the desk, he asked in a vague voice, "Do you remember what I was talking about the last time you visited?" "You mean the alien thing?" I answered, trying to make my voice sound light. The smirk on my face was forced and obviously fake. I had given in to his suspicions and he knew it. Before he would have rubbed this fact in my face, but today he didn't. Such things didn't seem to matter to him anymore, which made my voiceless fears even greater. No, not just humanity, but all life on Earth had been engineered. An external source created it and maintained it. It was my belief. At this he laughed a dry, mocking laugh at his use of the word he had previously despised. It's my belief now that the Earth experienced various stages of life. There have probably been several of these stages, back when the Earth was first formed up to and including today. Of the earlier versions we have no substantial evidence of. The last one before us, though, we have several indicators lying around. He left it hanging, waiting for my mind to catch up. It didn't take long, although I was surprised how easily I was accepting of the possibility of another one of his eccentric theories. "You mean the dinosaurs, don't you?" I said quietly, his restraint somehow infecting me as well now. A small smile arranged itself on his lips, but the sadness never left his eyes. "Indeed, those big dumbling sods before us. For sake of clarity, I've classified them as version 5.0 of life on Earth. We are 6.0. Now I have reason to believe." "What about your message? Did you get an answer?" I asked again, this time a bit more impatiently. "Not just my message. The Earth's been sending radio signals and more out for quite a few years now. If we can find their signals as I've proven, they can certainly pick up ours, even the unintended ones." "What are you saying, Ben?" "They got our messages, and they took action." I tried to swallow a now dry throat. "What action?" "You work in technical support, right? What's usually the first recommendation when something stops working?" "I don't know. Usually turning it off and back on again does the trick in a majority of cases." At this, my voice trailed off as I realized what he was implying. What was said about March 25th and the lost 27 minutes and 54 seconds. Ben started laughing, trailing off into a sad cough as he saw what he had done to take hold in my mind. Then, he suddenly went off on a tangent, just like the old days. I listened, despite the sick feeling in the pit of my stomach at what I was thinking now. Chariots of the gods. The chariots of the fucking gods. Imagine that. Aliens coming down to teach ancient civilizations new tricks. Or maybe they didn't. Maybe version 6.0 was still under warranty at the time. And part of that warranty included on-site maintenance. Hell, My money's on the Greek gods actually being extraterrestrial consultants sent down to fix bug problems. Makes you wonder which of the code fucked up and triggered Pompeii. Shut up, I suddenly raged. Maybe he was in one of his mad phases again, but I knew he wasn't. The sane, logical part of me didn't want any more truth. I knew I couldn't handle anymore. I looked up and Ben was staring at me. Not in anger, but in sympathy. He settled next to me on the beanbag, passing me a beer he had obviously just fished out of the small fridge he kept behind his desk. I took a long swig and let myself breathe, then passing it back, taking that as a cue to continue. He did, but quieter this time, less tinged with the hysterical note that had appeared to be emerging in his speech earlier, like he'd reached the peak of his madness and was now trailing off the other side. It would explain why so many people believed in the pantheons of the gods back in the day. Alien engineers popping down to fix the system whilst we were still covered, just like Microsoft ending support for older versions of Windows. Maybe we passed the date of when version 6.0 of Life on Earth was covered, so they stopped coming. He took a swig and passed it back. His voice was now wistful, his eyes focused, trying to look past the unfathomable void where he imagined our progenitors resided. And now, in this age of radio and microwave signals, the people of Earth are finally sending messages and emails that can be picked up by their gods, bemoaning this and the failure with their bodies, their families, and the world around them, demanding answers. These messages tumble across the ether of space, some picked up by Blackwater tech support and some forgotten nebula. The number of messages reaches a critical mass, a statistical point where action must be taken, and some alien equivalent of a high school dropout named Gary checks a scrap of paper on his desk for the instructions to an age-old piece of software. He downed the rest of his beer, then turns it off, and then back on again. Silence reigned for a few minutes, during which he stood up and made another trip to the fridge, this time bringing back several more bottles. He settled back on the beanbag and passed me one before he spoke again. "I got a message back, you know," he said simply. I looked at him incredulously and then demanded, "Jesus, Ben, what did it say?" His eyes were dark, pausing a long while before reaching into his back pocket and unfolding a piece of paper, mumbling something about decryption software, language analysis, and auto word formatting, before passing it to me. It read, "Dear Earth, thank you for replying in regard to our recent query as to your ongoing happiness with your software. We passed on your multiple concerns to the relevant technical support help desk. Unfortunately, ongoing support for your current system, Life 6.0, has ended. The initial reboot of the hardware-software attempted previously appears to not resolve your issues. Therefore, we will be refreshing your system to the previous stable release, Life 5.3. Your contract does not include backup restoration of existing data, so all current data will be wiped out post-version Life 5.3. Thank you for using Life. Please contact if any further issues occur. Best regards." Refresh was all I could mutter, confused and dread dulling my senses. Using the version of numbering as a guide, my guess is they'll be resetting Earth to somewhere in the late Jurassic period, he muttered thoughtfully, taking another swig of beer. I sent a message back, of course, asking them not to do anything. Even if I touched the proper lines, we have decided to continue with our current installation. Please do not reboot or refresh our system. Please ignore all other bug reports unless forwarded by me, Ben Glover, System Administration of Earth. Hopefully, they got it in time. Bug reports? Prayers. Oh. Then I looked at him again. The look of disbelief was obvious in his eyes. Systems Administration of Earth? He didn't meet my gaze, but rather sheepishly kept his eyes locked on his beer bottle. Well, it had to sound like I was in charge, didn't I? "Do you think they got your message?" I asked hopefully after a pause. "Honestly, I don't know. We can hope, though. By my calculations, we'll know in the next couple of hours or so. It's why I invited you over, I guess. So we can watch the end together." Then again, we might just wink out of existence. His voice trailed off. Silence reigned again, broken by our occasional sips. There wasn't, in all truth, very much left to say. After a while, he finished his beer, rested it gently down next to him, and then yawned expensively, leaning back on the beanbag with his hands clasped behind his head, and then said matter-of-factly, "Well, to be perfectly honest, I don't think the dinosaurs were given a fair enough crack of the whip the first time around. I think they should be given another go." I turned in disbelief to argue with him and his irresponsible attitude, but then I saw the barely suppressed laughter in his eyes. When all was said and done, what was there left to do but wait and see what happens, and laugh at the absurdity of all of it? He started, and then I joined in, till the tears were rolling down our cheeks. And we sat there, laughing and drinking our beer, until the world ended. Maybe. Guys, I would like to thank my $10 and above patrons for their continued support. It means this channel keeps going, and it means the world to me. Anyone who patrons the channel or joins the channel as a member, that kind of stuff keeps this channel going. Thank you so much, Mr. Swiston, Official, Jerboa, and Chaos X. You guys are really truly awesome. And if you want to join them in getting a shout out or your name in the description below, let me know by going to Patreon in the description. Thank you.